What's up guys, it's Creomancer here, and today I am featuring another one of my magic decks. This is a commander deck, and it is among my favorite to play. In an upcoming video it will be featured, and I will be uploading the deck list today for this deck. If anyone's interested in seeing it, I will leave it pinned in the comments. And also on the tapped out page, I will leave this video in the description. Alright, so getting started. Muldrotha the Gravetide. She costs 1 blue, 1 green, 1 black, and 3 generic. She's a legendary creature, elemental avatar. Power and toughness are 6 and 6. During each of your turns, you may play up to 1 permanent card of each permanent type from your graveyard. So you can use her to play a land for a turn. You can use her to cast a creature, to cast an artifact, an enchantment, planeswalker. Anything that sticks on the battlefield, you can use her to play one of them per turn. And it specifies one of your turns, which is really good. It comes in handy on so many occasions. So, I will be starting with my 0 drops today. As usual, I like going up in mana cost. It just seems to make the most sense. So, first 0 drop is Tormod's Crypt. It's a 0 drop artifact that allows you to exile a person's graveyard. Also, Mox Amber. 0 drop legendary artifact. You can tap to add 1 mana of any color among legendary creatures and or planeswalkers you control. So as long as you control a legendary creature or a legendary planeswalker, which all planeswalkers are considered legendary now, you can tap to add a mana of one of those colors to your mana pool. 1 drops. I only have 1, and that is Vampiric Rites. It's a simple 1 drop enchantment that allows you to pay a couple of mana, sacrifice a creature, gain a life, and draw a card. Doesn't seem like much, but it really comes in handy. So, moving to the next is 2 drops. And I have a Sakura Tribe Elder. No, stand up. Some cards are being a little finicky. Sakura Tribe Elder. And this is a 2 drop Snake Shaman. Sacrifice Sakura Tribe Elder. Search your library for a basic land card and put that onto the battlefield tapped. And then shuffle your library. It's a very good card. You can use it to deal first damage pretty easily, or you can use it to block and then get a creature out of it and still keep the damage from coming. Get a land out of it and keep the damage from coming toward you. It's really handy. I have a Perpetual Timepiece in here, and this is both a utility to keep you from decking yourself out and losing because you can't draw cards, as well as keeping your graveyard safe. Muldrotha is definitely a graveyard commander, so you want to make sure people don't get rid of your whole graveyard. This is just one way that you can do so. I have Blood Artist. It's a 2 drop vampire. Power and toughness are 0 and 1. Whenever it or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This was also featured in my Aristocrats deck. I have a Primal Druid. It's a 2 drop 0/3. When Primal Druid dies, you may search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Very nice for when you're running a little bit low on lands. Cranial Archive. A 2 drop artifact. Pay 2, exile it, and then target player shuffles his or her graveyard into his or her library, and then I draw a card. So, this allows you to also keep yourself from decking out if need be, or keep your graveyard from being exiled. Plus, if you are running up against another, excuse me, if you are running up against another graveyard deck, you can always use this card to get rid of their graveyard temporarily. Olivia's Dragoon. And that is a 2-drop Vampire Berserker that allows you to discard a card, and then it gains flying until end of turn. It's very handy when you have a handful of things, but have a Reliquary Tower on the battlefield, and you'd rather have the things in your graveyard because it would be a lot easier to interact with them. So I keep one discard outlet in the deck. Next, we have Zulaport Cutthroat. Also featured in my Aristocrats deck, it is a 2-drop 1/1 human rogue ally that whenever it or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Especially handy in multiplayer games of Commander, because you gain 1 life and then each of your opponents lose 1 life. You can use this card to kill everybody simultaneously. Three drops. First on the list is Sultai Banner. It is a 3-drop mana rock that taps for a black, green, or blue. You can play this card fairly easily most of the time, plus it is self-replacing. So later on, if you need to, you can pay 3, tap it, sacrifice it, and then draw a card. I have a Whisper Silk Cloak, and Whisper Silk Cloak is a 3-drop artifact equipment that gives the creature unblockable. And it's not exactly a keyword, but I really think it should be. It says equipped creature is unblockable and equipped creature has Shroud. So once you equip it, you can no longer equip anything else to it, you can no longer enchant it, and your opponents can't touch it either except through board wipes. The only thing you can do to get rid of the Shroud is to pay its equip cost to move that to another creature temporarily. But it does come in handy to keep your stuff safe. A Chromatic Lantern. That is another mana rock, but it has a special ability giving your lands the ability to tap and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, making sure that you are always in all of your colors. This is especially nice when someone plays something like Blood Moon, because even if they lose all of the land types and only become mountains, your lands still have the ability to tap at 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. I have a Nantucket Husk. Sacrifice a creature, Nantucket Husk gets +2/+2 until end of turn. It is a 3-drop zombie insect with base power and toughness of 2/2. This is just another sacrifice outlet. It's a very simple sacrifice outlet, but very effective when you pair it with other things. Three drops also include Dictate of Kruthix. This is a 3-drop flash enchantment that says at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. Very handy. On numerous occasions, having that extra card really makes the difference in the game. Putrefy. I think this is the only single target removal spell I have in the deck. This deck doesn't run a whole lot of removal. So this is a 3-drop, destroy target artifact or creature, and it can't be regenerated. Darksteel Ingot. 3-drop artifact that is indestructible, tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Very simple but elegant mana rock. Desecrated Tomb. That is a 3-drop artifact. Whenever 1 or more creature cards leaves your graveyard, create a 1/1 black bat creature token with flying. Now this may not seem like much, but it has come in handy on so many occasions to have that extra creature you can just sacrifice. That way you can search out another card that may allow you to also remove another creature from your graveyard, and then get another bat. The bat token that goes with it is also nice. I just like bats. Moving on. I have a Gate to the Afterlife. This is an odd one. Not many people expect you to play it, but it can become useful. That gain a life and then draw and discard. Definitely good at putting things in your graveyard, plus thinning out your deck a little bit and moving you farther along in the game with a little bit of card advantage. And when you have 6 creatures in your graveyard, which in Commander is very easy to do, you can pay 2, sack it, and then search your library for Godpharaoh's Gift and put it onto the battlefield. It also says hand and graveyard, I think. Which just basically means you get to play Godpharaoh's Gift for free, but without casting it. Stinkweed Imp. I know, it's Dredge. But I'm not playing Dredge. I am playing Muldrotha. This is the only Dredge card in the deck, but if it were up to me, I would have one more Dredge card in the deck, which is also extremely handy, and that is Dakmor Salvage. I'm still looking for a Dakmor Salvage. But Stinkweed Imp works for now. It's a 3-drop, 1/2 flying. Whenever it deals combat damage to a creature, destroy that creature. So it's pseudo Death Touch. And Dredge 5. So if I were to draw a card, instead I can put 5 cards from the top of my library into my graveyard and return Stinkweed Imp from my graveyard to my hand. Nissa, Voice of Zendikar. This is a 3-drop version of our friendly xenophobic elf, Nissa. She starts off with 3 loyalty counters. You +1 her to create a 0/1 green plant creature token. -2 her to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Or -7 to gain X life and draw X cards, where X is the number of lands you control. Now, a lot of times I just use the tokens as sacrifice fodder. The +1/+1 counters can come in handy, especially when you have something like Corpsejack Menace on the battlefield. And the gain X life and draw X cards is a late game utility, but also is extremely handy at times when it's getting close to the end of the game. You're both at low health, and you need something. You need that advantage, that winning edge. And Nissa has just been kind of sitting there, racking herself up a little bit, getting you tokens that you can use to block or sack out, whatever you need to do with them. Now, she is super buff, and you -7 her, gain some life, draw some cards, and finish off the game. Lore Skill Codal. This is an interesting 3-drop, and it really freaks people out. So, if you play it, prepare to be targeted, at least until it's gone. But it is a 2/2 snake that whenever you draw a card, you may put a +1/+1 counter on it. So, this paired with Dictate of Krufix and Alhamerit's Archive and Corpsejack Menace becomes overwhelmingly strong, overwhelmingly quickly. Because you will be drawing 1 card for turn, a 2nd card for turn, and Alhamerit's Archive will make it a 3rd card for turn at the beginning of your draw steps. That will be 3 +1/+1 counters you would put on it, and Corpsejack Menace allows you to put an additional +1/+1 counter on it for each of those +1/+1 counters. So you would be putting 6 +1/+1 counters on it per turn. Commander Sphere. This is a really nice mana rock. It has a tap ability that adds 1 mana of your commander's color identity to your mana pool. That is amazing because you always have your commander's color identity, regardless of where your commander is. So it always adds mana of your colors, plus a free sacrifice ability to draw a card. so it is also self-replacing. Pilgrim's Eye. That is one of my favorite Thopters in the game of Magic thus far. 3-drop 1/1, artifact creature Thopter, has flying, and when it ETBs, you may search your library for a basic land, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Simple, but effective. Sudden Spoiling. How many games I have ruined people's day with by playing Sudden Spoiling. This is a 3-drop instant with Split Second. As long as this spell is on the stack, players can't cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. Until end of turn, creatures target player controls lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 0-2. So many times people thought they were going to kill me by swinging all out with 45, 50 damage, and they were so excited about it, and then I cast Sudden Spoiling, and it becomes 0-5 damage. They then usually die on the crackback the next turn. It is an extremely useful card, and even more useful for politics if you're playing in a multiplayer format. Trophy Mage. 3-drop 2/2. When it ETBs, you may search your library for an artifact card with converted mana cost of 3. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. A lot of times, I use this card to either search out my Chromatic Lantern or my Pilgrim's Eye, according to whether I need the land or I need the mana fixing. Either are useful, but it's really on a case-by-case basis which one is used or done first, because it usually does come back multiple times. And finally on the 3-drops, I also have Nyx Weaver. This is a 3-drop 2/3 enchantment creature, Spider, with Reach. At the beginning of your upkeep, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard, and it has an ability to pay 3, exile it, and then return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Now, this is a utility card. It comes in handy, but it does not necessarily win the game. It's just a way to return a really important card from your graveyard to your hand if you need it right then. So, I use it, but sparingly. Moving on to 4-drops, I have a Beast Whisperer. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Very simple, very elegant. Especially useful when you have Muldrotha on the battlefield and you are playing a creature card from your graveyard a turn, plus whatever you have in your hand. Languish, because what good black deck doesn't have a Languish in it? Is this a 4-drop sorcery with all creatures get -4/-4 until end of turn? And this paired with Sudden Spoiling really, really ruins someone's day. Summary Dismissal. This is a 4-drop, instant, exile all other spells and counter all abilities. This is a good way to get around the casting effects of the new Eldrazi Titans, such as Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, or Kozilek, Butcher of Truth. Also, it is a good way to eliminate some of the special abilities that go along with other cards, such as the beginning of the upkeep effects or end step effects that would allow them to do special things with their graveyard or search for things. If you know it's a game ender when they do that, you can counter this ability. Sudden Reclamation. This is a 4-drop instant. Put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then return a creature card and a land card from your graveyard to your hand. It may not seem like much, but I have used this on so many occasions to return a fetch land and a Titania from the battlefield, from my graveyard to my hand. That way I could play the fetch land for turn, crack it, with the Gitrog monster, draw a card, search for a land, put it on the battlefield, then cast Titania, return the fetch land again, crack it, search for another one, and get to draw another card with the Gitrog monster, plus get a 5/3 elemental creature token. Marin of Clan Niltoth. This is a 4-drop legendary creature, human shaman. Whenever another creature you control dies, you get an experience counter. At the beginning of your end step, choose target creature card in your graveyard. If that card's converted mana cost is less than or equal to the number of experience counters you have, return it to the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand. This card is very effective, but also very target worthy. So if you play her, don't plan on keeping her long unless you're going to protect her with your life. Gonti, Lord of Luxury. The hidden gem of Commander, in my perspective. Gonti allows you to move things off the top of someone's library that would be very useful to them, as well as gives you another utility card for the rest of the game. He is a 4-drop, 2/3 legendary creature, Aetherborn Rogue, with Death Touch. And when he enters the battlefield, you look at the top 4 cards of your opponent's library. One of them, your choice. Exile one of them face down, then put the rest onto the bottom of their library in a random order, for as long as that card remains exiled. You may look at it, you may cast it, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. Unbelievably useful on so many fronts. Scapeshift. This one, a lot of people tell me I should take out, but I can never bring myself to it. 4-drop sorcery, sacrifice any number of lands and search your library for that many lands. I don't run many lands in my deck. I run 33. So once I have found at least 16 lands, usually 15 or 16 will do, but around that number, I will play this card, sack all my lands, and then search for that many lands to put them onto the battlefield. Now, there are some other creature cards that go along with this that make a really wonderful combo. But, even by itself, it is extremely useful, because it puts lands in your graveyard that you can play with Muldrotha, as well as triggering the Gitrog monster possibly, and thinning out your deck, making it where you only draw action cards. Corpsestack Menace. I've already mentioned this card a couple of times in this video. Now you get to see it. This is a 4-drop, 4/4 creature that's a fungus. If one or more +1/+1 counters would be placed on a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are placed on it instead. Absolutely beautiful card. Especially when you think about Nissa's ability. Moving along. Diabolic Tutor. I don't run many tutor cards, but this is one of them. It's a 4-drop sorcery. Search your library for a card, and then put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. Very straightforward, but it can really save you sometimes. Smothering Abomination. This is a 4-drop Devoid Eldrazi with flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature. Whenever you sacrifice a creature, draw a card. And its power and toughness are 4/3. Crystalline Crawler. This is a 4-drop artifact creature construct with Converge. It enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. Its base power and toughness are 1/1. Remove a +1/+1 counter from it, and Crystalline Crawler adds 1 mana to your mana pool of any color of your choice. So it is a utility rock that is one of any color. Plus, it has the ability to tap it and add a +1/+1 counter to him, which makes him a replenishable mana rock as well. Next on the 4-drop list is good old Gerard, Golgari Lichlord. Legendary creature, zombie elf. He gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. You may pay 3, sacrifice another creature, and each opponent loses life equal to the sacrificed creature's power. Sacrifice a swamp and a forest, and then you may return him from your graveyard to your hand. His base power and toughness are 2/2. Next, we have Inverter of Truth. This is a 4-drop Devoid Eldrazi with flying, base power and toughness of 6/6. When it enters the battlefield, exile all cards from your library face down, then shuffle all cards from your graveyard into your library. Now, I have had so many people complain to me about this card, like, why do you run it? It's useless, it's pointless, but this card has saved me a number of times. Because this is a 4-drop 6/6. So people are not expecting that big of a creature on such low mana. I'm sorry about the camera, hold on. People are not expecting that kind of capability from a 4-drop cost. Plus, if you are close to or out of cards, then you can use this creature to replenish your library one last time. Altered Ego. I'm not the biggest fan of magic that includes taking other people's stuff, but this is one exception, because you can either copy a creature you control, or you can copy a creature they control, and either can be extremely handy. It's all according to how you play him. And finally on our 4-drop list is Reaper of the Wilds. This is a 4-drop, 4/5 Gorgon. Whenever another creature dies, including your opponent's in this case, you scry 1. Then you may pay a black and give it Death Touch, or you may pay a green and a colorless and give it Hexproof until end of turn. So, and the space power toughness is 4/5. So this is a great creature to allow you to siphon through your deck a little bit faster if you need to. Get to the good stuff, you know. Razaketh's Right. This is a 5-drop sorcery that allows you to search your library for a creature, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So it's a basic tutor, but it does have a 1-cost cycling ability, which comes in handy as well. So I keep it in there. Krufix, God of Horizons. 5-drop, legendary enchantment creature, God. His base power toughness are 4/7. He has Indestructible. And as long as your devotion to green and blue is less than 7, Krufix is not a creature. Now, yes, he does have creature in his permanent types, and he does have a power and toughness, but He cannot be targeted by spells that say creature. He cannot be used to attack or be used to block, or anything that would affect creatures does not affect him as long as your devotion to blue and green is less than 7. And just for the sake of argument, devotion, for all those who might not know, is the number of mana symbols that match a blue mana symbol or a green mana symbol for him in the card's casting cost among permanents you control. So if you control him, your devotion to blue and green is 2, because you have 1 green and 1 blue. If you control him and Muldrotha, your devotion to blue and green is 4, because you have 2 green and 2 blue. Let's just say you also control any other blue-green creature like Lorescale Coatl. Then your devotion would be 6, because you control 2, 3 green, and 3 blue. So on and so forth. Then all you would need is 1 more green or 1 more blue mana symbol among permanents you control to have a devotion of 7 or more that would make him a creature. His other abilities include you have no maximum hand size, and if unused mana would empty from your mana pool, that mana becomes colorless mana instead. So as long as he's on the battlefield for the rest of the game, you can float mana indefinitely. If you have unused mana at the end of people's turns, you can tap it and add it to your mana pool, and it just becomes colorless at the end of a step, turn, or phase. Another 5-drop is the Scarab God. This is a 5-drop legendary creature, God. Base power toughness is 5/5. At the beginning of each upkeep, opponents lose X life, and you scry X, where X is the number of zombies you control. Pay a black, a blue, and 2 colorless. Exile target creature card from a graveyard, and create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. And when the Scarab God dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. Hour of Promise. This is a 5-drop sorcery that allows you to search your library for up to 2 land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. Also, it has the added effect: if you control 3 or more deserts, create 2 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. Good sacrifice fodder or chump blockers. Underrealm Lich. This is a 5-drop, 4/3 creature, zombie elf shaman from Guilds of Ravnica. Very, very good card. This card is a way to get around decking out. If you run out of cards in your library, this card will save you. Because if you would draw a card, instead look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put 1 into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. That one word in there, that one key word instead, is what saves you. So instead of drawing a card, you look at the top 3 and choose 1, and then put the other 2 in your graveyard. But the rules of Magic say, if you would draw a card and have no cards in your library, you lose the game. So, this bypasses that altogether. Plus, it has its own safety precautions. So you can pay 4 life, tap it, and give it indestructible until end of turn. It just is so great. Mazarek, Crawl Death Priest. This is a 5-drop legendary creature, insect shaman, with flying. Whenever a player sacrifices another permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. This, with Corpsejack Menace and Scapeshift can change a game. Because instantaneously, your creatures can become 28, 28s, 35, 35s. I've seen them go even higher than that before. The Gitrog Frog. One of my personal favorite legendary creatures, because everyone else counted it out when they were playing it in Standard, but I loved it. I just never had enough to play it. So, I play it in Commander. This is a 5-drop legendary creature, Frog Horror, with Death Touch. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice the Gitrog monster unless you sacrifice a land. You may play an additional land on each of your turns, and whenever one or more lands is put into your graveyard from anywhere, draw a card. Its base power and toughness are 6/6. So, in a lot of instances, I will have one land in my graveyard that is really easy to return, such as Drownyard Temple, or that's meant to be sacrificed, like Dunes of the Dead. That way you can get utility out of the Gitrog monster. Plus, you get to draw cards, and if you pair that with something like Underrealm Lich or Scapeshift, the Gitrog monster becomes instantly so much more busted. Overwhelming Stampede. This is a 5-drop sorcery. Until end of turn, creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So let's just say you're meandering on along, and your lore skill total is now a 15/15 because people have let it get a little bit out of check, but someone is, waiting to destroy it. They have something on the battlefield that's a sorcery speed that'll destroy it next turn, or whatever, right? But it's your turn, and you have 5 spare mana. You think you can probably eliminate that player. Well, now, with Overwhelming Stampede, you have the possibility of eliminating even more. Because this guy gives all of your creatures +15/+15 and trample until end of turn. Now, that's not too much, but imagine that with someone like Muldrotha, who happens to be a 6/6, and your commander on the battlefield. This can really change the flow of the game. Because all of a sudden, if they have nothing to block with, or someone you're playing against has nothing to block with, your commander becomes lethal because of this. All of Merit's Archive. This is a pretty simple artifact, but it is legendary, and it costs 5 generic mana. If you would gain life, you gain twice that much life instead. If you would draw a card, except the first card you draw on each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead. So this bulks up your hand each turn, as well as allows for extra life gain from something like Zulaport Cutthroat or Blood Artist. It's just an added bonus. Archfiend of Depravity. This is a 5-drop demon with flying. Base power and toughness is 5/4. At the beginning of your opponent's end step, that player chooses up to 2 creatures that he or she controls, then sacrifices the rest. This is a great way to help keep your opponents at bay. Especially if they're running like a tokens type deck or something along those lines. Because this card will make it where they keep 2 tokens a turn, if that's what they want to do, or they're 2 more valuable creatures per turn. Titania, Protector of Argoth. This is a 5-drop, 5/3 legendary creature, elemental. When she enters the battlefield, return target land from your graveyard to the battlefield. And whenever a land you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a 5/3 green elemental creature token onto the battlefield. This card runs especially well when paired with the Gitrog monster and any fetch land or search lands, such as Terramorphic Expanse or Evolving Wilds. Moving on to 6-drops now, we have Rexiel, the Risen Deep. This is a 6-drop, 5/8 Kraken with Island Walk and Swamp Walk. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from that player's graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that card will be put into a graveyard this turn, exile it instead. I especially love using this card to cast a kill spell that was just used to kill one of my creatures from their graveyard, to kill one of their creatures, and then get rid of it so they can't use it again. It just is beautiful in its own irony. Ulvenwald Hydra. This is one of my favorite Hydras. Even though Hydras like Progenitus or Hero's Bane are stronger and more capable, this one has more utility to it, because this is a 6-drop Hydra with reach, whose power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. Plus, when it ETBs, you search your library for a land and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. May not seem like much, but it can be huge. So, I always run an Ulvenwald Hydra in any deck that requires green and lands. Multani, the Marrow Sorcerer. Summon Legend. This is an old one. So, legendary creature. Multani has power and toughness each equal to the total number of cards in all players' hands, and she cannot be the target of spells or abilities. So this was Shroud before they really had Shroud. Rishkar's Expertise. This is a 6-drop sorcery. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. And then you may cast a card with converted mana cost of 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. Izani, Thousand-Eyed. This is a 6-drop legendary creature, Elf Shaman, base power and toughness of 2/3. It has the ability of Undergrowth, which is a Guilds of Ravnica ability. When Izani, Thousand-Eyed enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 black and green insect creature token for each creature card in your graveyard. Then you may pay a green and a black, sacrifice another creature, and you gain 1 life and draw a card. Similar to Vampiric Rites, but she creates the tokens that are good sacrifice fodder on her own. Spinebiter as our final 6-drop. Now, this one is not really needed for the deck. I'm sure there are other things that would fit into the deck better, but I just like having a little bit of infect every now and then. So I have Spinebiter, and this is a 6-drop 3/4 infect that you may have it assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. So regardless of whether they block it or not, you can still give a player 3 poison counters. Moving on to the 7-drops. We have Behold the Beyond. This is one of the best 7-drops in the deck, simply because it is a 7-drop, so you've already played most of your cards by the time you're able to cast it. So discarding your hand is usually not a problem at all. And then you get to search your library for 3 cards and put them into your hand, and then shuffle your library. There have been so many occasions that I have cast my whole hand around turn 6, and then I cast that on turn 7 and search my library for a Razaketh the Foul-Blooded, a land, and a Meren of Clan Neltoth. Because that Meren is going to come in handy on making sure that you keep your creatures that you need on the battlefield. Zendikar Resurgent. This is a 7-drop enchantment. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land produced. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. So it doubles my mana and draws me extra cards. Why not? Runescar Demon. This is a 7-drop creature demon with flying, base power and toughness of 6/6. Whenever Runescar Demon enters the battlefield, search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. Just a handy little tutor on a stick. God Pharaoh's Gift. This is a 7-drop artifact. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 4/4 black zombie, and it gains haste until end of turn. Now, this card can be really useful, especially if you're close to ending the game already, but otherwise I don't recommend playing it right away, because you want to be able to return those creatures to the battlefield using another ability or another effect. That way you're not exiling them. But if you absolutely have to, then this card will work. Meteor Golem. This is a 7-drop 3/3 artifact creature that when it enters the battlefield, you destroy a non-land permanent an opponent controls. Really, it has no other special effect than that, and its use is just destroying things over and over again by returning it to the battlefield and sacrificing it and returning it to the battlefield, really just to keep other people at bay. And our final 7-drop is Butcher of Malakir. This is a 7-drop creature vampire warrior with flying, base power and toughness of 5/4. Whenever Butcher of Malakir or another creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. This is another way that I help to keep my opponents at bay, because I can sacrifice cheap fodder like the Nissa tokens or the zombie tokens or the Izani tokens, bat tokens, anything that is completely inconsequential, and Butcher of Malakir will cause them to have to sacrifice creatures that are probably much more essential than the creatures I have. 8 drops. We have Archetype of Endurance. This is an 8-drop enchantment creature, Boar. Creatures you control have hexproof, and creatures your opponents control lose hexproof and can't have or gain hexproof. Its base power and toughness are 6/5. This card is especially useful when dealing with a commander that naturally has hexproof, or when dealing with a deck that's designed to give your creatures hexproof like tokens do. And finally, the last non-land card of the deck, also an 8-drop, is Razaketh the Foul-Blooded. This is an 8-drop legendary creature, demon, 8/8 Flying Trample. Pay 2 life, sacrifice another creature. Search your library for a card and put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. So, I've come to realize, in a recent game I've had, that I can use this card with Zulaport Cutthroat and Blood Artist to make my opponents lose 2 life, and I gain 2 life, but because I paid 2 life, I break even on it. So I get to sacrifice a cheap creature, usually, token or something, and each opponent loses 2 life, and then I search for any card in my library and put it into my hand. It makes this card so useful. Alright, so the land I'm going to go through pretty quickly, just because I don't want this video to be too long, but it's really simple. I have 1 land that naturally produces mana of any color. It produces a colorless, or you can tap in an untapped creature control and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Plus is a desert. So, you can use it to help work with Hour of Promise. Opulent Palace taps to add 3 colors of the Sultai color combination. Lumbering Falls adds a green or a blue, and you can pay so much mana, and it becomes a 3/3 with hexproof. Botanical Sanctum, a fast land. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or fewer other lands, taps for a blue or a green. Thornwood Falls comes into play tapped, but you gain a life when it enters the battlefield, and it taps to add a blue or green. Hissing Quagmire enters the battlefield tapped, pay a black green, and a colorless, becomes a 2/2 with Death Touch until end of turn, and it taps to add a green or black. Overgrown Tomb. This is the Shockland, of course. Swamp Forest taps to add a black or a green. When it enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 life, or it enters the battlefield tapped. Jungle Hollow enters the battlefield tapped, but you gain a life when it enters the battlefield, taps to add a black or a green. Drowned Catacomb. This is a check buddy land kind of thing. When it enters the battlefield, if you control an island or a swamp, then it enters the battlefield untapped. Otherwise, it enters the battlefield tapped. It taps add a blue or a green to your mana pool. Dimir Guildgate. This is, of course, a Guildgate for the color combination of Dimir. It enters the battlefield tapped. Taps add a blue or a black. Submerged Boneyard. Enters the battlefield tapped. Adds a blue or a black. Just like Dimir Guildgate. This card is basically the same, except it doesn't have gate on it. Dismal Backwater. Land enters the battlefield tapped. ETBs, you gain a life. Taps add a blue or black to your mana pool. Windswept Heath. The only fetch land I have in the deck, because it's the only fetch land I own. But it is tap, pay a life, search your library for a forest or a plains card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So I usually use it to search out all my forests I have in the deck and my Overgrown Tomb. Evolving Wilds. Tap it, sack it, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tap, then shuffle your library. Terramorphic Expanse. Pretty much the same thing. It just has a different name. Hashup Oasis. This is a land, it's a desert, it adds a colorless, or you can pay a life and tap it and add a green. Pay 2 green and a colorless, tap it, sacrifice a desert, and target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn, but you can only activate it as a sorcery. Desert of the Glorified. This is a black producer desert, enters the battlefield tapped, and has a cycling cost of a black and a colorless. Reliquary Tower. This is a strictly colorless producing land, and it allows you to have no maximum hand size. If near Deadlands. Tap, add a colorless, tap, pay life, add a black, pay 2 black, 2 colorless, tap it, sacrifice a desert, put 2 -1/-1 counters on target creature, activate this ability only as a sorcery. Desert of the Indomitable. It is a desert that ETB's tapped. You tap it at a green and has a cycling cost of a green and a colorless. Drownyard Temple. Strictly colorless producing. You pay 3 and you can return it from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Dunes of the Dead. Tap, add a colorless to your mana pool. When Dunes of the Dead is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Rogue's Passage. Strictly colorless producing. Pay 4, tap it, target creature can't be blocked this turn. Gaia Reach Sanitarium. Strictly colorless, legendary land. Tap, add a colorless, of course. Pay 2, tap it, each player draws a card, then discards a card. And finally, for our non-basics, is Desert of the Mindful. This is a desert that enters the battlefield tapped, adds a blue, and has a cycling cost of a blue and a colorless. I run, as far as my basics go, very minimal. 3 swamps, 1 island, and, of course, 3 forests. So, this deck is pretty good. It's among my favorite to play, just because it always has so much interaction with itself and other decks. So, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed it, you liked the deck, hit the like button. If you have any suggestions, I'm always up for constructive criticism. Leave a comment. If you want someone else to see this deck, go ahead and share it with a friend. And if you ever have any kind of ideas for my channel, I'm all ears. So, one last time, thank you guys for watching. This is Creomancer signing off, and I'll catch all you guys in the next video.